amounting to a dereliction of duty for any Prime Minister. So I refuse to vindicate any pessimistic forecasters there may have been by taking up the scalpel yet again. Based on our assessment of the international situation and our foreign policy goals, I've decided that the era of cutting our defence budget must end, and it ends now. I'm increasing defence spending by £24.1 billion over the next 4 years. That's 16.5 billion more than our manifesto commitment, raising it as a share of GDP to at least 2.2%, exceeding our NATO pledge and investing £190 billion over the next 4 years. More than any other European country and more than any other NATO ally except the United States. The Ministry of Defence has received a multi-year settlement because equipping our armed forces requires long-term investment, and our national security in 20 years' time will depend on decisions we take today. I've done this in the teeth of the pandemic amid every other demand on our resources, because the defence of the realm and the safety of the British people must come first. I pay tribute to my right honourable friends, the Chancellor and the Defence Secretary, who believe in this as fervently as I do. Reviving our armed forces is one pillar of the government's ambition to safeguard Britain's interests and values by strengthening our global influence and reinforcing our ability to join the United States and our other allies to defend free and open societies. The international situation is now more perilous and intensely competitive than at any time since the Cold War. Everything we do in this country, every job, every business, even how we shop and what we eat, depend on a basic minimum of global security, a web of feed pipes, of oxygen pipes that must be kept open, shipping lanes, a functioning internet, safe air corridors, reliable undersea cables, and tranquility in distant straits. This pandemic has offered a taste of what happens when our most fundamental needs are suddenly in question. And we could take all this for granted, ignore the threat of terrorism and the ambitions of hostile states, hope for the best, and we might get away with it for a while before calamity strikes, as it surely would, or we could accept that our lifelines must be protected, but we're content to curl up in our island and leave the task to our friends. My starting point is that either of those options would be an abdication of the first duty of government to defend our people. My choice, and I hope it will carry every member of the House, is that Britain must be true to our history, to stand alongside our allies, sharing the burden and bringing our expertise to bear on the world's toughest problems. To achieve this, we need to upgrade our capabilities across the board. We've already united our international effort into a new department combining aid and diplomacy, led with grit and purpose by my right honourable friend, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Secretary. Next year will be a year of British leadership when we preside over the G7, when we host COP26 in Glasgow and celebrate the 75th anniversary of the first United Nations General Assembly in London. We're leading the world towards net zero with our 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. And we're campaigning for our values, particularly freedom of religion and the media, and giving every girl in the world access to 12 years of quality education. But extending British influence requires a once-in-a-generation modernisation of our armed forces. And now is the right time to press ahead, because emerging technologies, visible on the horizon, will make the returns from defence investment infinitely greater. We have a chance to break free from the vicious circle whereby we ordered ever-decreasing numbers of ever more expensive items of military hardware, squandering billions along the way. The latest advances will multiply the fighting power of every warship, aircraft, and infantry unit many times over. And the prizes will go to the swiftest and most agile nations, not necessarily the biggest. We can achieve as much as British ingenuity and expertise allow. We will need to act speedily to remove or reduce less relevant capabilities, and this will allow our new investment to be focused on the technologies that will revolutionize warfare. Forging our military assets into a single network designed to overcome the enemy. So a soldier in hostile territory will be alerted to a distant ambush by sensors or satellites or drones, instantly transmitting a warning, using artificial intelligence to devise the optimal response, and offering an array of options, from summoning an airstrike to ordering a swarm attack by drones, or paralyzing the enemy with cyber weapons. New advances will surmount the old limits of logistics. Our warships and combat vehicles will carry directed energy weapons, destroying targets with inexhaustible lasers. And for them, the phrase "out of ammunition" will become redundant. Nations are racing to master this new doctrine of warfare, and our investment is designed to place Britain among the winners. The returns will go far beyond our armed forces. From aerospace to autonomous vehicles, these technologies have a vast array of civilian applications, opening up new vistas of economic progress, creating 10,000 jobs every year, 40,000 in total, levelling up across our country and reinforcing our union. We're going to use our extra defence spending to restore Britain's position as the foremost naval power in Europe, taking forward our plans for 8 Type 26 and 5 Type 31 frigates and support ships to supply our carriers. We're going to develop the next generation of warships, including the multi-role research vessels and Type 32 frigates. And this will spur a renaissance of British shipbuilding across the UK, in Glasgow and Rosyth, Belfast, Appledore and Birkenhead, guaranteeing jobs and illuminating the benefits of the union in the white light of the arc welder's torch. If there is one policy which strengthens the UK in every possible sense, it is building more ships for the Royal Navy. Once both of our carriers are operational in 2023, the UK will have a carrier strike group permanently available, routinely deployed globally, and always ready to fight alongside NATO and other allies. Next year, Queen Elizabeth will lead a British and Allied task group on our most ambitious deployment for 2 decades, encompassing the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and East Asia. We shall deploy more of our naval assets in the world's most important regions, protecting the shipping lanes that supply our nation, and we shall press on with renewing our nuclear deterrent. We will reshape our army for the age of networked warfare, allowing better equipped soldiers to deploy more quickly, and strengthening the ability of our special forces to operate covertly against our most sophisticated adversaries. The security and intelligence agencies will continue to protect us around the clock from terrorism and new and evolving threats. We will invest another £1.5 billion in military research and development designed to master the new technologies of warfare, and we will establish a new centre dedicated to artificial intelligence and a new RAF Space Command, launching British satellites and our first rocket from Scotland in 2022. I can announce that we have established a national cyber force, combining our intelligence agencies and service personnel, which is already operating in cyberspace against terrorism, organised crime, and hostile state activity. And the RAF will receive a new fighter system harnessing artificial intelligence and drone technology to defeat any adversary in air-to-air combat. Our plans will safeguard hundreds of thousands of jobs in the defence industry, protecting livelihoods across the UK and keeping the British people safe. The defence of the realm is above party politics, and we all take pride in how British resolve saved democracy in 1940, and British internationalism, directed by Clement Attlee, helped to create NATO and preserve peace through the Cold War. The wisdom and pragmatism of Margaret Thatcher found a path out of confrontation when she met Mikhail Gorbachev in 1984. In each case, Britain tipped the scales of history and did immense good for the world. Now we have a chance to follow in this great tradition, to end the era of retreat, to transform our armed forces, bolster our global influence, unite and level up across our country, protect our people and defend the free societies in which we fervently believe. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Right Honourable Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. Mr. Speaker, under my leadership, national security will always be Labour's top priority. Britain must once again show global leadership and be a moral force for good in the world, both in how we tackle present and emerging security threats, but also in how we build a fairer, greener and more secure world. So we welcome this additional funding for our defence and security forces, and we agree that it's vital to end what the Prime Minister calls, I have to say with complete lack of self-awareness, an era of retreat. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a spending announcement without a strategy. The government has yet again pushed back vital parts of the integrated review, and there's no clarity over the government's strategic priorities. And then there's the question of money. How will this announcement be paid for? Such is the government's handling of this pandemic that the UK has the sharpest economic downturn of any G7 country. Next week, the Chancellor will have to come here and set out the consequences of that. So can the Prime Minister tell us today, will the commitments he's made require additional borrowing, mean tax rises? If so, which ones? Or will the money have to come from other departmental budgets? In particular, at the election last year, there was a very clear Conservative Party manifesto to, and I quote, spend 0.7% of GNI on international development. So a straight question, Prime Minister. Is the government going to keep to that manifesto commitment? He must know that if he breaks it, that would not only undermine public trust, but also hugely weaken us on the global stage. The Prime Minister spoke of an era of retreat, a really interesting phrase after a decade of Conservative government and underinvestment in our armed forces. Can I remind the House that defence spending has fallen by over £8 billion in real terms over the last 10 years? Over the same period, UK regular forces have decreased by a quarter, and on top of that, the National Audit Office estimate there's a black hole of up to £13 billion in the MOD equipment plan. So the additional funding today is on foundations that have been seriously weakened over the last 10 years. And let me come to a point that's very important to our armed forces personnel. Can the Prime Minister tell us, will there be any further cuts to the size of our armed forces over the period of this spending review? There are a number of other holes in the Prime Minister's plan. With less than 6 weeks to go to the end of the transition period, there's still no clarity about the direction of our post-Brexit foreign or trade policy. And the government has not yet rolled over existing trade agreements with 15 countries. That's deals worth up to £80 billion of trade a year. The Prime Minister speaks of tackling global security threats, improving cyber capability, and that is all welcome, and we welcome it. But 4 months after the Intelligence and Security Committee published its report concluding that Russia posed, and these are their words, an immediate and urgent threat to our national security, can the Prime Minister tell us why he's still not acted on this or followed through on the committee's recommendations? And when will he do so? And, Mr. Speaker, there was very little beyond warm words about how the UK will lead the global efforts against the biggest threat we face, the international climate emergency. The COP26 conference is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, but the climate change community says that the UK's domestic measures, quotes, are not making adequate progress in preparation for climate change. And yesterday's announcement, another press release without a strategy, will do nothing to address this. Mr. Speaker, this is a time of huge global uncertainty. It is time for Britain to emerge from a decade of decline. I know the Prime Minister is always keen to talk about the bits of government he enjoys, big announcements, space programmes, moonshots. But this statement shows the government still lacks a clear strategy or a coherent vision for Britain in the world, or any idea how the promises the Prime Minister makes will actually be delivered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of all the humbug I've heard from the right honourable gentleman opposite, I think that really takes the cake. This was a man who campaigned until December last year to install in government a Prime Minister who would have wanted to scrap our armed services and pull out of NATO. And his own record of support of our armed services very, very thin indeed. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that he now welcomes this package. I think I think the comments that he's made about it scarcely do it justice. This is the biggest package of support for our armed services, as I say, since the end of the Cold War. It bears absolutely no relation to discussions about overseas aid, and I can say I think this House and this country should be incredibly proud of what Britain does to support people around the world. And under any view, this country has been and will remain one of the biggest contributors to aid of any country on earth. I'm very, very proud of that. I'm proud of the way this package will help to deliver 40,000 jobs around the UK. And this is the party, Mr. Speaker, that fundamentally believes in defence of the realm, in supporting our armed forces and ensuring that the country as a whole is strong and is able to project our strength around the world. And it was very notable. And this is the country by the party, by the way, the government that instituted such extra protections for our armed services as wraparound childcare for armed services families. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, protects our veterans and the families of veterans from the misery of continual prosecution, vexatious prosecution by well-paid lawyers, Mr. Speaker, long after the alleged crimes were committed and when no new evidence has been provided. And it was the party opposite, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of the gentleman opposite, Mr. Speaker, who refused to vote in favour of the Overseas Operations Bill, which would have given veterans that protection and that reassurance. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think I've heard so much phony stuff from the right honourable gentleman in all the time that we've faced each other so far. This was a guy, Mr. Speaker, who campaigned actively to install somebody who wanted to break up our armed forces and pull out of NATO. I don't know what he was thinking then. He never mentioned his support for the armed services then, and I don't attach, frankly, much credence to it now.
Chair of Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome this commitment to significantly upgrade our defence posture, something he knows that I, the Defence Select Committee and others in this House have been calling for some time. Could I also welcome the honesty from the Prime Minister in recognising that the UK and indeed the West have become too risk-averse in standing up to some of the threats that we face. I recall my time of frustration as a Foreign Minister and Defence Minister in wanting Britain to play a more assertive and proactive role on the international stage, not just with our hard power, our soft power, but with our thought leadership as well. But there was ever less appetite to do so. So I very much welcome this statement today. Could my right honourable friend assure the House that as we take on the presidency of the G7, we will work closely with the new US administration in boosting Western resolve to confront a growing number of hostile competitors, including China, who have for too long been allowed to pursue their own destabilising and competing agendas?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend, and he's completely right. This package I believe will encourage and bolster our friends and our alliances around the world. It enables the UK to project global influence right into the future. That's why it's a multi-year package. And I don't think anybody around the world will be able to doubt from this announcement today our commitment to NATO, to the transatlantic alliance, and to the security of our friends and allies around the world.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. In the SNP, we support a refocusing on the contemporary threats that we face. We need to readjust our defence capabilities for the modern world, and it is especially important that a focus is given to issues such as cyber security. But what we do not accept is that the priorities of this government and the threat of the disbanding of historic regiments such as the Black Watch. Disbanding the Black Watch would show that the promises made to Scotland during the Scottish independence campaign have been broken, buried and forgotten by this government. We were promised 12,500 personnel to be stationed permanently in Scotland. The number remains well below 10,000. Such broken promises not only mean fewer jobs in Scotland, but also undermines Scotland's security interests. Madam Deputy Speaker, billions of pounds of taxpayers' money are still being spent on Trident nuclear weapons. Scotland remains overwhelmingly opposed to weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde. We need to respond to today's challenges rather than on vanity projects. Madam Deputy Speaker, the SNP also has serious reservations regarding such a windfall to defence spending during these unprecedented times of hardship for so many. This review will reportedly see the UK as Europe's biggest defence spender, when just 3 weeks ago this government refused to provide free school meals for children during the holidays. And we have learned that the UK government is considering cutting the overseas aid budget by billions of pounds. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister may use the term global Britain, but on these benches we believe the Prime Minister has his priorities all wrong. The Tories have closed DFID, one of the most successful departments of government, in order to politicise instead of focusing it on sustainable development goals. In our submission to the Integrated Defence Review, we've put forward sensible suggestions on how to meet the modern-day threat picture, but not to the detriment of our historic regiments in Scotland. I ask the Prime Minister today, will he rule out scrapping the Black Watch and cuts to international aid spending?
Yes.
You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, I mean, it is an absolute disgrace in the face of the threats that we get the contempt that we see yet again this afternoon from the Defence Secretary and his colleagues on the Tory benches. It's shameful, and he really ought to grow up and show some respect to the regiments of Scotland. Madam Deputy Speaker, with independence, Scotland can have a foreign policy that reflects our values and interests and a defence capability that matches capabilities to threats. With our submission to this review, we are looking to play a constructive role in informing UK policy, but we will be setting out how Scotland can play a full role as a normal, law-abiding, values-driven, independent country on the world stage.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can certainly give the right honourable gentleman that guarantee. And once again, he seems to be a veritable geyser of confected indignation. Of course, we're going to guarantee the Black Watch. The DFID will remain in East Kilbride as long as he doesn't continue with his ambitions to break up the United Kingdom. And even if he does, the DFID will remain in East Kilbride. Mr. Speaker, it's preposterous to listen to the Scottish National Party talking about their desire to support defence spending when everybody knows fine well that it's thanks to UK-wide investment that we're able to deliver not just the Black Watch and DFID in East Kilbride, but a fantastic programme of shipbuilding in Govan and in Rosyth, and under his plans, it's not just that there would be no deterrent, there would be no shipbuilding, there would be no black watch, Mr. Speaker, in the land of the SNP. That's the reality.
Fox.
Deputy Speaker, can I say to my right honourable friend that this statement smacks not only of promises kept, but promises exceeded, and I congratulate him for that. Does he accept that in an era when global cyber attacks threaten our entire way of life, from the economy to the NHS, that we need to spend more of our defence budget on assets that we cannot see, as well as updating our core assets, and this needs to be clearly explained to the British people? And in this war of the invisible enemy, does he believe that cyber doctrine has evolved to match our capabilities, especially on existential threats, in order to provide adequate deterrence?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy. My right honourable friend is an expert on what he's talking about, and I can tell him that obviously the National Cyber Force is working on doctrine that is currently evolving, but we will deploy our cyber capabilities, I'm sure he and the House would expect, in accordance with international law, and we will do it to protect the British public and our citizens.
We now go to the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we all owe an enormous debt to the brave men and women of our armed forces and security services for their work keeping our country safe. So we will give this review the study it merits, but can I immediately welcome the extra investment in cybersecurity, so Cheltenham's GCHQ and the amazing people who work there can continue to ensure the UK remains a world leader in this crucial aspect of modern defence. But with data and cyber so important to modern defence, he will know that access for our security services and police to European crime databases is vital to keeping the British people safe. So can the Prime Minister guarantee we will retain direct, real-time access to all these European databases after January the 1st?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that we have all the cooperation, and I thank the right honourable gentleman for his point. It's a very important one, and I agree with him what he says about GCHQ and Cheltenham. But I'm assured that we will be able to maintain all the cooperation, all the collaboration that we need to do to protect our people and our citizens, not just with our European friends and partners, but also with Five Eyes and other allies and friends around the world.
Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend has delivered for our armed forces today, and he deserves the support of the whole House, and particularly as he seeks to improve the procurement mechanisms of the Ministry of Defence as well. Will he bear in mind the wise words of General Mattis, the former American Defence Secretary, who told Donald Trump, and I quote, "The more you cut aid, the more I have to spend on ammunition." Britain's development leadership and the standing by our promise to the poorest of the 0.7, which was a manifesto commitment, will stand, my right honourable friend, in very good stead as he assumes the chairmanship of the G7 on January the 1st and promotes the important values of global Britain.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful for my right honourable friend's points, and he himself has done extraordinary work to champion the poorest and neediest around the world. And I think that this country, as I say, can be very proud of our record in overseas aid. And we lead the world, will continue to lead the world under this government. What I can say is that this review is about, this statement is about our defence and our security. And there's no read across to any other issue. And this is driven by our need to protect the British public, to keep the world as safe as we possibly can, and to unite and level up across our union with 40,000 more jobs.
Shannon.
Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his commitment to all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Would the Prime Minister further confirm that while the goal is speed, readiness and resilience as opposed to mass mobilisation, that for the British Armed Forces to remain the best in the world, training of personnel must be a top priority to ensure that whilst we are ready for technological warfare, we are also remain ready for physical forms of war, as well as how will the review of recruitment procedures secure that very goal.
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman makes a very important point. The Defence Review will ensure that we remain full spectrum capable, I think is the phrase, Mr. Speaker, that the House should use. Full spectrum capable.
We now go to Sir David Evanet.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I strongly welcome and support my right honourable friend's statement. We live in difficult times, but as he states, the defence of the realm must always remain a top priority. However, this announcement will be warmly welcomed by so many British businesses who rely heavily on our defence industry. Will my right honourable friend confirm that this will safeguard jobs, helping us build back and level up opportunity across our nation?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is use this defence package spending review not just to modernise and update our armed forces in a truly revolutionary way, if you look at what the package is doing, but also to drive jobs across the whole of the UK. And it's a very, very exciting prospect.
John Speller.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and Prime Minister, look, if this boost for defence spending is the first fruits of the departure of Dominic Cummings, it's most welcome, especially in ensuring we can continue to work effectively alongside our long-term allies and partners, the United States, even more so with the welcome arrival of President Biden. But can he also ensure that spending is, wherever possible, directed to firms in the UK, and that orders are also pulled forward to get British industry moving? And he can start with the Fleet Solid support ships, tell the Ministry of Defence to send out the invitations to bid, not in some ill-defined spring, as they're saying at the moment, but very early in 2021, and which will be a very welcome Christmas present and New Year message, not only for our shipyards, but also for our engineering steel industries and their communities as well.
Prime Minister.
Well, the honourable gentleman, I think he speaks for many, and he certainly speaks for me in what he says about the Fleet Solid support ships. But this is a great moment for shipbuilding in this country, and be in no doubt of the ambition of my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, who is now leading a renaissance in shipbuilding. He is the shipbuilding star, and I'm sure he will have heard the honourable gentleman's points loud and clear.
Deanna Davison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome in the strongest possible terms the incredible announcement today from the Prime Minister. Before joining this place, I worked for a County Durham startup in research and development and saw firsthand the incredible value that R&D brings to society, particularly when tech is developed that can then be applied to other uses. And I've got no doubt that investing in military R&D will lead to advancements for civilian applications in areas like aviation and autonomous vehicles. Indeed, the technology that allows us to see the Prime Minister beamed onto our screen today first came from a military communication innovation. So can my right honourable friend confirm that this package of funding will be underpinned by a strong commitment to military research and development?
Prime Minister.
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker, and there is a big chunk of this package which is specifically dedicated to research and development in cyber, in AI, in drone warfare, in all the warfare of the future. We need to the victors of the future will be those that are able to master data and new technology in the way that this package supports.
We now go to Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really welcome this commitment to our armed forces. In his statement, the Prime Minister spoke about defending our people and keeping the world safe. And I would argue that these are development objectives, thinking specifically around climate change, food security, creating stable governments and investing to end violence against women and girls. So how will the Prime Minister ensure that development remains front and centre of the UK's new international policy following the integrated review? And can he please quash rumours and confirm his manifesto commitment to the 0.7, both now and going forwards?
Prime Minister.
As I've said several times to the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we can all be proud of our record on overseas aid, and that will continue. But it's also by investing in armed services that you can do some of the greatest things for the poorest and neediest people around the world. Travelling around the world to countries that are in real distress, I often have found that the single export that they crave the most is the help and the reassurance and the security that comes from British armed services, and that's one of the reasons helping to keep our world safe is a huge a part of this agenda.
Ben Everett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, there the Prime Minister giving his outline of his defence spending plan, an increase in funding, £190 billion in total over 4 years, an increase of £24.1 billion, 16.5 million more than was in their manifesto. The big question, though, from the opposition is how they will fund this sum. Well, it's crossed Westminster now. Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates. How will they fund it? Will it come from the foreign aid budget?
Well, Boris Johnson left that possibility open. He was asked repeatedly by MPs on his own side, including former International Development Secretary Andrew Mitchell, as well as those on the Labour benches, what's going to happen to the 0.7% aid budget after next Wednesday's spending review. Answer came there, none. Andrew Mitchell was making the point that if you cut the aid budget, then, as General Mattis, the US General, said, sometimes you have to spend more on military intervention as a consequence. Boris Johnson chose to speak in the past. He said that we can be very proud of the role that aid has spent to date, but ultimately when he goes around the world, he finds poorer parts of the world craving these reassurance that British security can bring, perhaps, he didn't spell this out, but perhaps rather than the benefits that the British aid budget would bring. There is something of a Whitehall battle over the 0.7%. Now, you'll remember earlier in the year that the International Development Department was actually abolished and rolled into the Foreign Office. Now, when that happened, Dominic Raab promised that the 0.7% commitment would be maintained. Indeed, I'm told by ministers in the Foreign Office, Foreign and Development Office, that as recently as 6 weeks ago, they were still being promised that the 0.7% aid target was being maintained. But in the last week or so, rumours that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, wants to take a swipe out of it, have emerged. Boris Johnson isn't denying those, and so it does look as if that could be cut, certainly judging by the answers given by Boris Johnson today. But the Prime Minister really had, it was more of a sort of headline big picture message than a great deal of detail as he confirmed the £16.5 billion over 4 years today. Let's hear his sort of headline message, as it were.
I refuse to vindicate any pessimistic forecasters there may have been by taking up the scalpel yet again. Based on our assessment of the international situation and our foreign policy goals, I've decided that the era of cutting our defence budget must end, and it ends now. I'm increasing defence spending by £24.1 billion over the next 4 years. That's 16.5 billion more than our manifesto commitment, raising it as a share of GDP to at least 2.2%, exceeding our NATO pledge and investing £190 billion over the next 4 years. More than any other European country and more than any other NATO ally except the United States.
And Sam, the Prime Minister keen to stress that it's he wants to ramp up the old power, I suppose you'd call it, things like the Navy and the Army, but also looking ahead to cyber warfare really as well.
Yes, Boris Johnson committed to restore Britain's position as the foremost naval power in Europe. But then he sort of brought out his sketching pencil and we heard about a vision of the future of the battlefield. It involves satellite sensors and drones AI, swarm attacks by drones, cyber weapons, combat vehicles with directed energy weapons, and so forth. A veritable cornucopia of new technology that might be deployed one day on the battlefield. Worth pointing out, of course, that there is a more than £13 billion black hole in the MOD's equipment budget for previous projects of visionary projects that haven't quite gone to plan or have ended up being overspent. One of the goals of the announcement today is to help the military to, as it were, sort of reposition for warfare in the 21st century. But they've ended up announcing the money today before they publish the details of the review, which is now expected in the new year. So we can't quite match up how the goals that they're going to set themselves for what the money is going to be spent for relates to the sums of money that they're getting today, which I suspect is convenient.
Sam, thanks very much. Well, let's take you across to Scottish Parliament. Nicola Sturgeon is taking First Minister's questions.
But the responsibility of government means determining how we fund that, where we find the teachers from, and that involves a lot of hard work and proper consideration, which is what we will do. On testing, we have already expanded testing to a range of different groups. The Health Secretary will make a statement to Parliament next week, setting out not just the next steps of our PCR testing programme, but also how we're going to use the lateral flow testing technology to get rapid testing to groups of the population. We've already set out our plans for students. We will also use lateral flow testing to extend testing into more groups of NHS staff. We hope that we can do that in other groups of the population, and those who work in our schools, for example, we think are a priority for that. We will also set out plans for geographic mass testing in parts of the country with high rates of prevalence. So we will continue to do the hard work that is necessary to turn what we all want to see happen into reality. That's the responsibility of government, and it's one we all take very seriously indeed.
Alison Johnson.
Thank you. 2,500 staff absences have been reported in schools in recent weeks, so it's clear that action is urgently needed. Now, testing helps us identify who needs to self-isolate, but the Scottish Government's own evidence suggests that compliance with self-isolation is low. It may be as low as 1 in 4 people. And many people simply can't afford to self-isolate or to step away from important caring responsibilities, or they don't have the space at home. On the 27th of May, I asked the First Minister what support will be made available to those who need to isolate. For example, will accommodation such as hotel rooms be offered free to those who need them? She replied, the short answer to that question is yes. And the evidence has long been clear that providing hotels for isolation significantly increases compliance, as New Zealand has found. Indeed, they also provide meals, medical care and laundry services free of charge. So can the First Minister tell me how many people have been provided hotel rooms for self-isolation since May? And can she commit today to ensuring that anyone who needs a hotel room to self-isolate will be given one?
First Minister.
What happens now, and a lot has happened since May, not least the self-isolation support payment that people can now apply for, which we are looking to see whether we can enhance and extend to other groups. But we have set up through local authorities an outreach service so that everybody, starting with those in the lowest income and most vulnerable groups, get a call when they are advised to self-isolate so that their individual needs can be properly assessed. So we will continue to assess whether there are accommodation needs or whether there are other needs that can be met. And we will again, just as we will with support for schools, just as we will with the rollout of testing, we will continue to enhance the support we can provide for those who are being asked to self-isolate, given the importance of that particular intervention to help and control the spread.
Thank you. Question number 4, Willie Rennie.
Liberal Democrats secured a commitment from the government for 800 dedicated mental health professionals. They were for doctors' surgeries, A&E, but also for the police to help them with the increasing numbers of incidents that involve mental health. 3 years on, only 12 of those mental health professionals have been allocated to the police. That is truly pitiful. Why is the government not supporting our police with the enormous mental health challenges that they face?
First Minister.
I don't have in front of me right now, I don't think, the up-to-date figures on the allocation of the 800 additional professionals, but I will make sure I send that to Willie Rennie in terms of how that is allocated overall and to particular services. We support our police service in a number of ways. We have protected numbers of police officers. We have increased funding through the most recent budgets for the police service. And of course, Police Scotland works in a range of different ways to support the mental health of police officers, and we will continue to do that across police, teachers, the NHS in particular. The pressures of COVID will have raised significantly the mental health pressures that these public servants are working under, and we will continue to ensure that we are doing everything we can to respond to that.
Willie Rennie.
Well, we'll step away from First Minister's questions. Nicola speaking there in Holyrood. Nicola